This is Sunrise, it's 7 o'clock. Our top stories today, a failure to deal with so-called honour violence. More cases are... Hello, a very good morning to you. You're watching Sunrise here on Sky News. I'm Sarah Jane Mee. New figures shared with Sky News suggest that police are failing victims of so-called honour crimes, with only 5% of the reported cases going ahead to prosecution. The Iranian and Kurdish women's rights organisation says that of the 5,000 cases that were reported to police, only 256 were sent on to the Crown Prosecution Service. Well, these crimes occur within households, families or communities arising out of a perceived insult to honour. Sky's Charlotte Lomas has more details. In other news today, Donald Trump is visiting the Korean Peninsula as part of his Asian tour. The entire region is going to be waiting to see whether the provocative approach he's so far taken towards the threat of North Korea's nuclear weapons programme is carried forward. We can go to Seoul. Our Asia correspondent Katie Stallard is there, and we are expecting a news conference from President Trump later on this hour. Katie, what kind of tone do we think he'll take? But now Jonathan has more details on the Texas shooting. The authorities continuing their investigation today, Jonathan.
Yes, lots more information coming out.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Well, joining me now, Polly Herah, the founder of the Sharon Project, a group that supports women on things like forced marriages, violence and female genital mutilation. Polly, good morning to you. Now, we're talking this morning because our top story is about so-called honour crimes. New figures shared with Sky News suggest that police are failing victims. Only 5% of cases reported to police are actually then moving on to the Crown Prosecution Service. Let's start at the beginning. What constitutes an honour crime? Because a lot of people watching at home will have read about them in the newspapers, heard about them on Sky News, but won't actually understand what they are.
Of course. So honour crimes are, in effect, that in turn then leads to crimes that are committed in the name of so-called honour, but the reality is that they're crimes. So we've seen historically in cases where young girls have...
These figures show that thousands are reported to police, but only a fraction, 5%, are actually leading to the prosecution process. Why do you think that is? Is it a lack of understanding by police, or is it the difficulty in gathering evidence? Because often these honour crimes, as you said, are committed within families and communities, very close groups.
I think there's a few issues here when it comes to the conviction rates, and I do know that the police, since the HMIC...
The most difficult positions a person can be in if you are a young girl and this crime is being carried out by your brothers, for example. Very difficult to go to the police. So what other options are there for these women?
I think certainly the first thing that we would recommend...
Disturbing and, as you said, really difficult for not just, you know, the young girls to report it, let alone get to prosecution. So hopefully we raise a bit of awareness there for anybody that may be affected or know someone that is. Polly Herah from the Sharon Project, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick look at your Tuesday front pages now. We'll start with the Metro, which has not failed to make us laugh every time we've seen it this morning. Hello, Jackie.
Fish Factor.
The Fish Factor. Idea for a new show.
We used to have Fishermania on Sky. I know that because I was reporting for 5 years.
That definitely had the Fish Factor.
Fishermania had Fish Factor. Will David Moyes be at West Ham later? Did the fans like him? Can he save them? Can he save his own career? So many questions.
Oh, are you going to answer them all after the break?
No, but we'll have something after the break.
So many questions thrown up in sport. Jackie has none of the answers.
None of them. I've got none. I got nothing.
Thanks, Jackie. Right, let's talk politics. As the government continues to thrash out the terms of Brexit with the EU, they are paving the way back here at home for the possibility of no deal. The Trade and Customs Bill, more details of which will be released later on today, is going to transfer the EU's current trading deals over to the UK and allow for the UK to make our own free trade agreements. Well, to talk more about this, the International Trade Secretary Liam Fox joins me now from Westminster. Good morning to you, Mr. Fox.
Good morning.
Explain some of the details of this Trade and Customs Bill then. How's it going to work?
Well, they are in fact two separate bills. There's the Trade Bill and the Customs Bill.
But also a lot of people that voted for Brexit voted on the premise of taking back greater control. This just sounds a bit like a cut and paste job.
Well, if it were simply a cut and paste job, my life would be a lot easier than it is.
Complicated then, as you said, and this is how complicated it's going to be, because on the one hand, to continue trading with the EU as we do now, you're going to have to keep them happy and maintain the high standards, but you also want to forge new trade deals with the likes of America, who, let's face it, on certain aspects have slightly lower standards than the EU. I mean, you've got Wilbur Ross, the US Commerce Secretary, speaking yesterday at the CBI conference, talking about, and I hate to mention it because I know you don't like talking about it, chlorinated chicken. He said that there would be problems if the UK retained the current EU-wide bans on chlorinated chicken and genetically modified food. Now, this is a perfect example of trying to keep the EU happy and new trade partners happy, and you're not going to be able to do that, are you?
Well, we've made very clear that we don't see a drop in British standards as being something that...
Just to clarify, I'm going to use chlorinated chicken as one example. Let's just pick that out. How do you keep the United States happy? Because they are saying with the current EU ban, they wouldn't be able to trade with you on something like that. So that is an example of an obstacle you're going to face. How are you going to overcome it?
Well, with all due respect, there are far more important things that we'll worry about things like financial...
There are far more important things, but I'm just using that as an example because that is what the US Commerce Secretary has used as an example. So let's stick with that.
Well, I don't think that's going to be the sticking point in any agreement. We'll be looking at the most important issues. For example, what...
Trade bill and the customs bill a little later on today from your good self. Let's talk about the last 10 days in politics. We find ourselves in an unusual position where Brexit isn't really top of the political agenda. Our political correspondent, John Craig, has written a piece online, and he makes a good point. If you were to talk about the events that have happened over the last 10 days in Westminster, if you were to take it to a publishing house, they go, we can't publish that. It's unbelievable. You've got the Deputy Prime Minister accused of sexual harassment. You've got the Foreign Secretary making gaffes that have implicated a political prisoner's life. You've got another Cabinet Minister going to see the Israeli Prime Minister and other top officials while on her summer holiday, breaching ministerial protocol. And you've got the Defence Secretary resigning over touching someone's knee. It is farcical at Westminster at the moment, isn't it?
Well, I think that there's a conflation there of a number of things. First of all, if I just say on the Foreign Secretary's point, there's nothing that the Foreign Secretary has said that in any way whatsoever...
Which they will take issue with.
Well, I think we've got to be very careful here. There is absolutely nothing that the Foreign Secretary has said that would justify an increase in...
And while this legal system might not see it as a justification, it's very different over in Iran. So whether he meant to or not, he may well have influenced her sentence.
Well, the point I'm making is that in any subsequent discussion about that, such as we're having now, we must be very clear not to give the Iranian regime any excuse or any comfort that the actions that they're taking in quite clear breach...
OK, well, we can be very clear about it, but the Foreign Secretary should be clear about it. Should the Foreign Secretary keep his job after making this latest gaffe, which could have the most serious implications yet?
Well, I don't believe that it is a serious gaffe. I think people are in the...
Isn't it? That is exactly the point. He is talking about a regime that will use anything as justification to impose a harsher sentence. The Foreign Secretary, of all people, should be the man in this country the most aware of that.
I think that the Foreign Secretary was making very clear at...
Good morning, it's 7:37. You're watching Sunrise here on Sky News. On the way, a look through Tuesday's news. But first this morning, new figures shared with Sky News suggest that police are failing victims of so-called honour crimes. Only 5% of cases reported to police end up going ahead with prosecution. Well, the Iranian and Kurdish women's rights organisation says that of the 5,000 cases taken to police, only 256 reached the Crown Prosecution Service. Honour crimes are crimes that have occurred within households, families or communities arising out of a perceived insult to honour. Sky's Charlotte Lomas has more details for you. Jonathan's disappeared without giving the taste test. That's what you want. Sort it.
Sort it out for you. Don't worry.
Perfect. Yes, any excuse to eat chocolate first thing in the morning. Well, it is nearly Christmas after all. Michelle Gibri and Sam Delaney here.
Chocolate for my breakfast every day, you know, and I've done that for about 20 odd years. It's really
You have chocolate every day for your breakfast?
Single day of my life, and I keep trying to stop it.
In what form do you have it?
anything. Once, if I don't have chocolate in my house, once I rummaged through the cupboards and the only thing I could find was like a bit of an out-of-date Christmas decoration, and I ate it because it was the only chocolate thing I could get my hands on. It's a really bad habit.
That is a serious addiction to chocolate. Right, Sam, front page of the EU dictate Brexit, and that comes from the United States.
The United States. Now, Dave said, listen, if you have to retain certain rules and regulations about products and production, all the other views about the whole chicken thing. But what I do know is this, is that a trade deal's done with the rest of the world within a year, right? India, Indonesia, but you've got to accept freedom of movement. We want our citizens to come into your country for education, for trade, for immigration numbers at all. Well, so the whole thing's been a waste of time.
Well, as the International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, told me earlier on, it's a very complicated issue.
Right, yeah.
Go figure.
That's what he means.
Right, Michelle, in the Mail, this is an awful story. It's on their front page, and this is baby Elsie, who died at the hands of her father.
Yeah, and I know it's a really depressing story, and I did contemplate whether or not to do this, but I think it's important to highlight cases such
opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. This poor little girl, you know, just days after she'd been formally adopted by a couple, she died. And when you go through, you know, there's just so many instances it is. You know, how do you miss stuff like this? And that poor little girl, there would be so many people watching this that would give anything to adopt a little baby and treat her with love and care. And when I hear stories like this, it just breaks my heart.
Sam, take me to the Times. And we've been talking about this here on Sunrise, mainly because when you do a breakfast show, you're obsessed with sleep. But apparently having a lack of sleep is as bad as being drunk.
So they're always saying tired and become blurred, you cannot focus properly, you become confused and bleary. And that's the real risk. It's not that you're going to fall asleep, it's that while you're awake, you are not driving in a way that is responsible.
Since I've started doing this show, I now think really carefully about driving long distance or later on in the day, because tiredness does play a massive factor.
Yeah, and it's not fair because you're putting other people...
Is that have rooms. Have you ever been in one of them?
No.
No, nor have I. Just asking, because
I'm
interested. I've always been fascinated to know what they're like.
No, but I do remember a story once of someone pulling the car park.
Outrageous.
Right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll have more stories from inside today's papers for you after that. Got ticketed. Michelle and Sam taking you through today's papers, and it is official. It's the 7th of November, and Christmas is coming, Michelle.
Yeah, how exciting. I always know, I love a bit of Christmas, but when the Christmas adverts start on television, then you know it's real, don't you? It's happening. And people get quite excited by what it's going to be like. I don't know, the John Lewis ad, the Marks and Spencer ad. I always like the traditional Coca-Cola one, you know, where the holidays are coming. That's
nothing says traditional Christmas like Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Yes, true. Presents, but Paddington Bear saves the day and all is well. And
not
Christmas
just anyone,
continues.
Father Christmas trying to burgle this house.
Oh, is it? Well, I've not
Smearing
seen any
Santa.
of these yet, and I'm very excited about watching them. Are you?
I am, but I'm concerned by this idea that they're portraying Santa.
Everything straight, Paddington Bear saves the day, it's all fine.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about Santa here. I mean, how did Paddington become sort of more virtuous than Santa?
You're looking into it way too much,
yeah,
Sam.
I am.
Sam, I like this story in The Sun. I've not actually read it, but I just like the head.
Daddy and Wilson, it was £1,000 out of pocket after his daughter booked a trip to Disneyland as he slept on his phone. I've got personal experience of my son Len, who bought 5 cuddly kittens from Hamleys via a retail app on my phone, where you've got the old, I set up the old one, kept having to make special arrangements to return them. So we get through to customer service, they go, has he got another one? And it was, again, while travel and accommodation included.
Len could learn a thing or two.
That sounds reasonable.
That is quite
to make a kid's dreams come true.
Yeah.
Have a litter. So he was smart in that respect, but he could learn a thing or two from that girl in The Sun today.
Yeah.
Watch out, Sam. Right, we're going to have more papers coming up for you after 8 o'clock, but right now we're going to take a check on the weather with Isabel.